Hi, Mr. Hunter here. This is a short video project tutorial, so rather than the individual tooltips like you'll find elsewhere on the channel, this is a complete project showing how you would make this movie poster, and I kind of go through all of the basics, so you can really take this particular tutorial from square one if you're making a movie poster for your coursework. So enjoy, follow as you go, and feel free to let me know of any questions you have. Right, so let's get started. I'm trying to follow the same process that I would expect students to go through with this. So for this example, I want to make a movie poster, and what I've done is I've gone online and I've taken a look at the various movie posters that inspire me. I've kind of gotten together the codes and conventions. I know what makes a horror poster, for example. And I've picked one which I'm going to use as a style guide, and I think this is really, really important. So whether you're making a magazine or a movie poster, pick something to leave in the background which you can refer back to so you know how it looks. So I found this one online, and I'm going to go for it. It looks like kind of like a World War II thriller kind of action film, something like that. And I picked this one because I like the coloring, I like the composition, I like the fonts and stuff. So I'm going to try my hardest now to try and replicate this for mine. So what I'd be telling to my students now is I'd be telling them you need to plan your composition. You need to know how it looks on paper before you start designing it, because I find that usually doesn't end very well when you just go straight into Photoshop. So I did that and I kind of sketched it. So based on that one, I came up with this. It's called Das Battle. I know what I need to get. So I've got like my main actor here. I've got some trees up there. I've got kind of like another actor in a uniform and a few other people kind of firing guns down there. And the reason it's so important to do this is, like I said, you need to get together the assets that you're going to need before you start making it. Otherwise, you go into Photoshop and you don't know where to start. So that was the next thing I did. I got a shot of someone like this. I got a shot of someone like this, and so forth. I got all of my assets ready. So here's what I'm going to be working with in this tutorial. So there's Mr. Waits there, looking dangerous. There's me. And I've got everything I need to start making it now. So that's the stage, if I'm honest, before you start following this tutorial, that's the stage I'd want you to be at. I'd want you to know what it is you want to design, and I'd want you to have the assets there. So once you're at that stage, you can go ahead and open up Photoshop. So I'm using Photoshop CS6, and the various techniques I'm going to show you, they'll be the same really for the last several versions of Photoshop. So don't worry if you're running CS3 or something like that. Now, let me have a look. Let's go back to my example. Roughly, give or take, that's about A3 size. It's that kind of a portion. I'm not going to get into A2 or anything huge, because that's just going to take up more file size. So here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing we're going to have to do is make a new document, and that's very simply a case of going File, New. Now, you are free to enter your own width, height, resolution, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to stick to one of the presets. So the poster I'm making is going to be A4 size. So if we just go to International Paper Size here, you can see you can choose from all of these various different options. I'm going to choose A4, and what that has done is it's given it the correct width and height in millimeters, and it's made it 300 pixels per inch. So I'm going to press OK. And there we have our blank canvas. And the first thing I would encourage you to make note of is if you just come down here, if you click and hold where it says doc, on mine it says 24.9 megabytes. If you click down there, it will show you the pixel resolution. So my movie poster is 2,480 pixels across, that's down here, by 3,508 pixels in the vertical. That's up there. Now, why that's important is if you are using any images which are significantly less than that resolution, they are going to look very, very pixelated. So it's important that the assets that you use are in the thousands of pixels. That's what I'm trying to go for here. So where do we start, really? Let's look back at my style guide. Overall, the composition here is very dark. It's black and like almost a dark blue. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a background color. I'm going to do that down here. So I'm going to select the color. There's two here. That's your foreground color and your background color. I'm going to click on the foreground one. I want to have like, it's going to be blue, but it's going to be a really dark blue. Really dark blue, actually, verging on black. And I want that to be the background, so I'm going to use the fill tool. And if you come over here to the gradient, where it looks just a bit like that, and if you hold down, other options become available. So I want the paint bucket tool. I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to click. Okay. So I want that to be like the background, the base of ours, because it's going to be a really, really dark, dark movie poster. The next obvious thing to do, I guess, would be, if we go back to the sketch that I did, would be to start cutting out some of our actors. So looking through the various options I have here, I think this one's a little bit sharper. I think I'm going to go for this one, just because I like where the gun is lying next to his shoulder and the look on his face. He looks mad there. He looks really dangerous. So I'm going to go for this one. So that's the one that I've selected. There's a few ways that I could get this into my document, and that's the great thing with these tutorials is you'll find is I'm doing it my way, but there are actually 100 ways of doing anything in Photoshop. So for the first example, I guess I'll just show you. You can literally drag it in. So there we go. That's kind of made it possible to place that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of put it roughly where I want it to be. So here's the first tooltip for you guys. I can resize it at this point, and I can do that just by dragging at the corners. But the problem is we're not very good at kind of, keeping things in proportion just by eye. So very often, a pet hate of mine is I see a student that will, resize something and it becomes absolutely stretched or squashed. So my first tooltip would be if you hold down Shift on the keyboard, you'll see that actually locks it in proportion. It's impossible to skew it. So I think he looks good about that size. And once you're happy with him there, you can just press the tick up here or the enter button. Perfect. I'm happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to click the move tool over here and just kind of get him about where I want him. That is about perfect. That's where I want him. So, okay, our first task is going to be to cut out that background. And like I said, there are many, many ways we can do this. I'm going to do this by actually cutting them out. This is a rather lengthy way, but it's a way that I find you tend to get pretty good results. I'm just pressing Control and plus on the keyboard to zoom out. So Control plus, and that gets me nice and zoomed in. Now the first thing I'm going to do is select my selection tool. That's this one here. And there's several different types. There's one, this is the lasso tool, and that kind of requires you to have a very steady hand, much steadier than mine. And you can see that's not going to be easy. That's not going to be easy at all. So the other option you have is the polygonal lasso tool. And this is one that lets you set anchor points. So I'm going to literally just start cutting them out like this. Set an anchor point. And I just clicked. And now it's more or less a straight line. So I'm going to click again. Click. Click. I do more clicks around a corner just because we want to try and make it look like it's got a nice curve. But we can actually improve that a little bit later. Right, so I've just gotten to the end and I've cut everything out and I need to join it up. You can try and join it up until that little circle appears, or just to be safe, kind of leave it in the area where there's a line of sight between the two, and if you double click, then it joins it all up. Now, as much as I tried my hardest to keep those lines absolutely straight, you can see there are some areas where maybe I've kind of cut a bit off, or I've not done it terribly accurately. So at this stage, we have the ability to refine edge, and that's a little button up here. And if you click that one, depending on which version of Photoshop you're using, you might have to go select, refine edge. But in CS6, there's a handy little button there. And what that will do is it will show you what you've got selected at the moment. And by doing it like this, where it kicks out the background, I can actually see I've been really sharp. And there are some edges which are just too sharp to look natural, and it's not very nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up smooth. And yeah, I don't know if you can see very well, but that is just really nicely just feathered those edges ever so slightly. so they're nice and smooth. But what I'm also noticing is where he was on a green screen, some of that green has bled onto him. I don't like that very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift edge, and I'll just show you extremes first. If I shift that all the way down, you can see it brings it in quite a ways, and if I shift it all the way up, it kind of like lets it go out a little bit. So I'm not going to go all the way down, but I do want to bring it in a little bit, and I might want to add some feather as well. And again, just to show you an extreme example, if I bring feather right up, you can see it really softens the edges. I don't want that too much, but I'm going to add just ever so slight, just a little bit, okay? So that is now what I've got effectively selected. And if I press OK, those changes will take place. Okay, so we're on our next problem. I'm going to press Control minus, and that's me zoomed out. The next problem we've got is I want to get rid of the background, not him. And obviously I've got him selected. So if I was to press backspace, if that comes up, you've got to rasterize your layer. So there's a little symbol here. It means when I placed it, I didn't rasterize it. Right click on that layer, click rasterize layer, and now we can edit it. So I want to get rid of the background, not him. But if I press backspace, I'm getting rid of the wrong part. That's just press Control Z to undo. I want to basically invert what I've got selected. So everything else is selected, but not him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Select, Inverse. And I don't know if you can see, but what it's done now is everything else is selected, he isn't. And now if I press backspace, we've got exactly what we want. Cool, so I want to get rid of this, I want to get rid of my selection. I don't need it anymore. So I'm just going to go Select, Deselect, or I could have pressed Control and D. Where are we now? I'm not really liking the fact that there's still some green in here. So I'm going to try and get rid of that if I can. I'm going to press Control and U, and I want to try and get rid of those greens. So I'm going to change where it says Master. I'm going to change that to green because we don't want it to be obvious that he was on a green screen. And what I'm going to do is lower the saturation. Saturation is literally how much color there is in it. So if I bring that up, you'll see that those greens are kind of exaggerated. You'll see them more. If I bring them all the way down, you can see that's just gotten rid of those greens. It's a very subtle difference, but I don't know if you can see. Look at the side of the gun. So that's before, after, before, after. Okay, so I think that's an important change that we needed to make as well. Okay, so I'm kind of liking his position there. Obviously, I'll play a little bit around with that once I've got the other elements in. I'm just going to get rid of some of the other green that wasn't in the screen at the time. So I'm just going to select a box, draw a box around the other bits, and press backspace. Again, I just want to get rid of some of this stuff because I don't need it. Get rid. Move these out the way. And press backspace. So he's completely cut out now, and I've been pressing Control D to deselect. Okay, what's next on our sketch? Let's put in a picture of me doing the salute now, and I'll show you a different way of cutting out. So again, I'm going to look at my various different options. I think there are only two. So there's this one and this one. They're more or less the same, but there's a little bit of camera blur on that one. So I'm going to use this one. Again, I've shown you how you can just drag something into your composition. Another option is, from Photoshop, you can go File, Place, and that will allow you to do it manually. This is, if I'm honest, this is just a longer way of doing the exact same thing, but it really does show you there are so many ways of doing it. So I've got to remember where I put them now. YouTube, movie poster, and the one I was going to go for was this one. So I'm going to press Place, and it effectively does the exact same thing. So that's been placed in. Right, so he needs to go in the bottom corner. Let's place him about there. Again, I'm going to hold Shift just as I resize him. Just as I resize it so that it doesn't skew. I kind of like that. No, let's go a little bit bigger. Let's go a little bit bigger and just move them over ever so slightly. I like that. Okay. So let's think of another way that we can get rid of that green background. I'm going to zoom in, Control plus, Control plus. And what I'm noticing here is actually the color difference between the gray jacket I'm wearing, the color of my hand, my hat, the side of my skin, the difference in color between all of those different things and the green is pretty good actually. There's pretty good contrast there. So when you're in that position where it's obvious the line where you want to cut out, you can use several different tools. You can use the magic wand, or you can use the quick selection tool. I'm going to show you the magic wand first. So the magic wand will magically select everything of the same color. And it usually starts, I think, on 32 tolerance, and I'll show you what that means. So go ahead and select the green. What it's done is it's tried to pick all colors of the same green. And what you will find is, on that green screen curtain that I was using, there is a difference between this green and this lighter shade of green, and then behind me the shaded area of green. So it's not actually been able to select everything. That's not really much good to me. So what we can do is change the tolerance, and the best way that I think of tolerance is how much are you going to tolerate? Think about parents at home. If they have got no tolerance, it means they will not have any discrepancies. Whereas if they're very, very tolerant, it's like, yeah, you can do that, that's fine. It doesn't have to be the perfect green. So naturally, the more tolerance we have, the more shades of green it will accept. So I've just changed the tolerance up here to 50. Let's see what happens if I select the same area again. Okay, so we've got a little bit more. It's still not perfect, but we're getting there. Let's try bringing it up to 75. Here we go. And I don't know if you can see, that has now selected everything right up to my jacket, going all the way around. But we've got two little areas there, which I need to get rid of as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Shift. And can you see how the little plus icon appears below the magic wand? I'm going to press plus and then click, and that's added it to the selection. Again, I'm going to do that inside my glasses. There we go. And just in the jacket down there. Excellent. And the great thing about doing it this way, if you're able, we don't have to worry about inverting it like we did last time. So I've got that background area selected. I need to rasterize this layer because it's been placed. So rasterize. Again, anytime you see that symbol down there, it just means it's a vector. It's not been rasterized, so you won't be able to do much to it. And I'm just going to press backspace. There we go. That was certainly a lot easier than the last one, but it only works if you shoot on a background like that. So again, I don't know how obvious this is to you watching on YouTube, but I've got areas of green there, and that's really bugging me. So I'm going to show you through menus how I did what I did last time with Control U. So I would go Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. It's the greens that are bothering me. So rather than, if I kept it on Master, I can change the amount of saturation in the whole thing. Obviously, I don't want that. I'm happy with the overall color. It's just the green that I want to get rid of. So greens, let's bring that all the way down. And again, I'm just going to change that. So can you see at the bottom of my my sleeve there? There's a bit of green. We're getting rid of it, and on my hat as well. So that's much better, having been desaturated. Okay, so it's starting to come together now. We've got our two actors. There's going to be a third actor in. I will restart this video once we've cut those out and we start looking at text options. Okay, so we'll carry on. The only thing that's changed, what I've been doing is I've done the same techniques. I actually used the magic wand again to cut out these guys, and it's getting to the stage now where actually I've kind of populated my poster with most of the assets that I've taken. So if I look back at my plan, if I can find it, my plan is right here. It's kind of getting there. So like there's the guy that I wanted. I've got my guy saluting. I've got a few people shooting. I've had to play around with how they're positioned. I'm going to put some text just about there, and I've got some trees that I'm going to put there. Now the first thing I'd say is like the composition is something that can change. It is organic. You can play around with it, and you're going to do that really in the layers palette, which is over here. And all of the things that you've put in has their own layer. So in other words, if I wanted to play around with this guy, I'd have to select this layer. And I can move that one by holding down Control. And kind of like have him all over the place. I don't need to cut that out because he's going to go back there. I could change the size of anything if I decide afterwards, actually, I think he's a little bit too small. I could press Control and T, which is transform. So remember, T for transforming something. Control and T, and that brings back up this box. And again, I'll hold down Shift, make him ever so slightly bigger, move him across slightly. And when I'm happy, I'm just going to move him across. And when I'm happy, I'm going to put him... Actually, I don't know how close he is to that hand. I'm going to put him there, press Enter. I think Mr. Waits, bless him, is a bit too big. So I'm going to move him out the way ever so slightly. And these guys, I guess I'm kind of happy with where they are. Now, I think the next thing we've got to do is get in a background. So I've already got one that I've sourced. And I'm going to do the drag version because I think that works better. So here's a background that I want to go in. And I'm just going to drag that in. And the first thing you'll notice is it goes in wherever it was. I want this to be right at the very back. So what I can do is I can change, if I press tick, I can change what's in front of what by dragging them. So if I drag it right to the very top, it's effectively in front of everything. If I drag it right to the very back, which is where I actually want it, it will go behind my models. So that's absolutely perfect. I want to change the size of it again. So I'm going to press Control and T. I like that a lot. That looks cool. Okay. So I've got those trees up there. It'll go very pixelated when you're first doing this. Very pixelated, but don't worry, because as soon as you press Enter, that will like rectify itself. So that's kind of where I want it. It's just giving you a preview. I'm going to press Enter. There we go. It is a little bit pixelated. Now, I don't want to keep all of this image. There's only parts of it I actually want to keep. I quite like the trees up in the top, but I want it gradually kind of like fading into blackness. So if I go back to the one that I was copying, I love the way that this just goes gradually into darkness. So I want to try and emulate that. So what I'm going to do is, again, I've got to rasterize my layer. I'm going to make it fade into the background beneath it. So to do that, what we do is we use something called a mask. And I'm going to click this button right here, Add Layer Mask, on the layer that I want to add it to, Layer Mask. And you see all it's done is it's applied this white box to it. Now what that is something that tells you, it tells which parts of the image are visible and which parts are see-through. So essentially, white means it is completely visible, black means it's invisible. Varying shades of grey will obviously change the amount of transparency there. So if I get the gradient tool, I'm going to hold my finger down on the paint bucket, change it to gradient tool, and if I make sure I've got black and white, so I'm going to click this button here. I've got black and white, but I want black to be at the foreground, and I have black fading into nothing. I can, with this mask selected, draw a gradient up, and you can see how actually, where I've got it going from black to white, it's made that background slightly invisible. So I can do that like maybe a few times if I want it a bit more. There we go. I like that. That's kind of what I'm looking for the background. That's kind of where I'm going. I'm going to make it a bit smaller actually, because I think maybe, yeah, it was hard to tell it was trees at first, I think. Yeah, that's better. That's better. So yeah, I've made it a little bit smaller, but it carried across the layer mask as well. So I'm really liking where that is at the moment. Now, the other problem is Mr. Waits, poor thing, has just been cut off at the bottom. He needs to like fade into it. So I'm actually going to do the exact same thing again. This is great because it allows you to kind of like repeat what we've got there. So I've selected that layer. If you lose track of which layer is which, you can just press the little I and make it visible. So okay. So that's Mr. Waits layer. So I'm going to click on this one. Again, I'm just going to click on the Add Layer Mask, and it's done that. It's automatically added a white layer mask. And I've already got the gradient tool selected. It's going from black into transparency. So just starting at the bottom of Mr. Waits' jacket, I'm going to drag up, not too far, and there you can see it's making him fade into the background rather than being that very sharp cutoff, which was very jarring before. We've got this effect. So I'm liking this. I'm liking the top. I like the way that's looking. I'm gonna have to have a slogan up there. I think I'm gonna have my title around about there. I want to move these guys down a little bit. So what I could do is I can move them all one by one, or I could hold down Shift and select several layers at once. And now, if I try and move, I can move them all at once. So they were just a little bit big. I'm going to make them a bit smaller too. So I'm going to press Control T, and you can see it's actually resizing all of them. That's better. That's left me a little bit more room to play with. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Happy with that. All right, so this is definitely coming together. Obviously, this is just arranging the elements. I think what we need to do now is add the title. So let's look at the text tool. If you press T on the keyboard, or if you just come over here to the type tool, you can select to make a new type layer. So I want it to be right at the very top, so I've selected the topmost layer so that I know that the text is going to go right at the top of my layer palette. I'm going to just click wherever I want it. And I think I said I was going to call it, not Dad Battle, Das Battle. All right, so it's defaulted to whatever font I used last time for whatever reason and whatever color. So we need to start changing this. You can select all of this text, and the first thing I'm going to do, if I look back at my style guide, yeah, they've chosen a really nice kind of like rusty font. I'll show you how to do the rust effect in a minute, but for the meantime, I think we should be doing it on a base of white. So I've selected the text, and you can see it's black up here. I'm just going to change that to white. Next thing I want to do is select a font which works, and it looks like stencil. Yeah, it looks like stencil. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm pretty sure I've got a stencil font somewhere. You can go through, see what you've got. Somewhere I've got a stencil. Stencil. It's not looking good. Ah, here we go. Stencil. Stencil. There we go. I really like that. It's a bit too big, so what I can do is change the size. So you can either go through and select or type in. It only goes up to 72, which I find really annoying, so you'll have to type in to go any higher. Or you can just select it and press the down arrow on your keyboard. So this is good because it lets you just see like a visual representation as to where it should be. So that looks really nice for battle. I want Das to be a little bit smaller. A little bit smaller than battle. That kind of works. I like that. And I want them, if I select all of it, so if I just select it all again, I want it to be, cancel that. I want it all to be selected. I want it to be central. So there we go, that's centered it. That looks kind of cool. But I'd like them to be a bit closer than that, if I'm honest. So what we can do is go Window, Character. And these are like advanced tools to help you if you're doing any text. Now the one I want, I think, if I'm not mistaken, is it this one? There we go. This says how far the lines are apart from each other. So again, I'm just going to select that, go up, and I want them to be quite close, if I'm honest. I quite like that. Maybe I'll make a little line to go between them. That would look quite cool. Yeah. So, there we go. Das Battle, that's the name of our little movie there. I can just close that away now. And again, just by selecting this tool, I can move it, or it's just a shortcut, so you don't have to come out of the tool you're using. Hold down Control, and that's a cool way to just have like a quick shortcut to just quickly move something. And then when I reswing, it's gone back to the text tool. So yeah, I kind of like that. I think I like that. I want to put in a line as well. I think a line would look cool. Did it do that on the... Yeah, there's like this cool little like dotted line there. I'm starting to think it should be a bit bigger now. If I just if I double click on the T there, it'll automatically select it. Or I could just select the actual layer and press Control and T and resize it like this. There we go. So I transformed it that time. So that's kind of cool. I like that. But what's bothering me is that it's just sat there. It's just sat on my little character here. I want it to have like a drop shadow is a bit cheesy these days. I want it to kind of like burn into the background. If you look back at this one, look at how there's just this kind of like slight discoloration, this darkness behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and emulate that. I'm going to right click on this layer. I'm going to go to blending options at the top. What we're going to do is going to click on outer glow. And you can move this out of the way so you can see what you're actually doing. It'll default to some standard settings. What I'm going to ask you to do is change the yellow color here to black. That'll look kind of cool. And what I want you to do is change screen to, what should we try? Let's try color burn. No, color. No, let's go to linear burn. Linear burn, and what that is rather than actually just putting a black shadow underneath the writing, it's going to burn the colors of whatever is underneath. In this case, my arm, and it would just make it look more like it's been like stamped and singed in there, which is more of an effect that I'm after. So let's just change these settings. Let's just show you what happens if you throw them all the way up. Okay, so if I throw them all the way up, there's a big kind of burn around it. I don't want that much, so I'm just going to gradually bring that back. If I bring up the spread, that will say how sharp the edges are. So again, just bring that down ever so slightly. No, I don't want it to be too much. That's kind of like, that's a bit too blatant for me. So I'm just going to bring down the opacity maybe. There you go. That's subtle. And again, if I just show you without, with, without, with, I think that works. That gives that little bit of extra depth. But I also now want to kind of like give it that real rusty depth that we had in the one that I'm kind of copying. Because if I go back to my example, you know, my real world example that I want to try and emulate as much as I can, you'll see that the text, it's got this really lovely texture to it, and that's something I want to try and emulate there. So let's try and do that now. So what we're going to do is we're going to do that using a mask, just like we've done down here. And what we're going to do is with our text layer selected, we're going to press New Mask. And what we can do is we can actually see this on the screen. So if you hold down Alt on the keyboard, which I'm doing now, and then you click on the white there you can see what the mask actually looks like. As you can see, it's white, so everything's visible. Now what you need to do is go into your web browser and do a search for a texture. I've done a search for rust texture because I thought rust would give that really nice texture that we're looking for. So once you've found the one you like, which is of good resolution, you've got to right click, press copy image, and then go back into Photoshop. And I'm just going to press Control and V, or edit paste would have worked just fine. And there you can see we've actually put it in there, just where we need it. So I'm going to press Control and T, make it a little bit smaller actually. There we go. Press Enter when I'm happy with that. And now if we press Alt again, I'm holding down Alt and I click on that. That's kind of showing us where it's going to be. So that looks kind of cool. That looks pretty good, I guess. But it really needs to be blacks and whites, and that really is what we've got there, working more in greys. So I'm just going to resize it ever so slightly. Try and get it just where I want it. Yeah, that looks kind of cool. And yeah, that looks alright. But what we're going to do is going to try going Image, Adjustments, Threshold. Now what this will do is it will make it a very stark black and white. Things are they've got to belong to either the black or the white camp. And you can see there, just by playing around with that, I've got it to kind of disappear. It's almost like fading away in that bottom element there. So if I just press OK now, see that effect there? It looks really nice down there. And I'm just going to press Control plus, Control plus, Control plus. And yeah, you can see it's just starting to weather, and you can actually see through it, just where it looks a little bit more worn there. And obviously you can try and move that around, see if it looks better in another position. There. Yeah, so I'm quite happy with that title now. That looks really cool. And the next thing that occurs to me is it's a bit too colourful. If we go back to this one, it's very, very bleak. And there's also like this snow effect, isn't there? So let's try and get in the snow effect. And for this one, this is a texture I want to put all the way over. So I'm going to put down snow texture. And this is something that, again, just adds such depth to it. I think I saw a lovely one. That's a nice one. They're quite low resolution though. Here's a really cool tip for you. What you can do is press Search Tools, Size, Large, and it will only show you ones which appear to be, you know, in the thousands, as it were. Ooh, that's a nice one. That's a really nice one. Okay, so I'm going to settle on this one. I think I'm going to settle on this one just because I like that kind of bluish tone it's got as well. It's a nice high resolution. So yeah, that will work really nicely for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, right click, copy image, and it's literally just going to go over the whole of mine. So I've got the top layer selected. I'm going to press Control and V, and there we go. Obviously, I'm going to have to resize this quite considerably. Ideally, I'd have gotten one that was a high resolution, but if we put it just there, that's a really nice texture. Now this is again where I want to just go through various blending options and see what makes it look the most effective. That does not work. Multiply, not really. Nor color burn. Lighten. Yeah, we'll go with screen, I think. We'll go with overlay. We'll go with overlay, but I'm just worried that that's maybe made it a little bit too dark. So let's just lower the opacity ever so slightly there. That's it. So yeah, that's added that little bit more depth to the image. But now the problem that's really striking me is there's just too much color in the overall image. I think we just need to make it slightly more desaturated. So now I'm going to go to this adjustments panel up here, and I want to play around with the overall saturation. So if you go to hue saturation, this is going to add a layer that applies to everything beneath it. And what's great is it's not actually changing the images themselves, it's just putting that effect on top of everything. So straight away, by desaturating it ever so slightly, as you can see I'm doing there, I think that straight away improves things. I do like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think I'll also improve the brightness and contrast. So let's bring up that brightness and a bit of, high contrast, make it look quite vivid. Yeah, that works. That works nicely. And maybe the last thing, if I can just change the color balance. I think we should add some blue. Not too much though. Not too much. Yeah, that works. That's kind of cool. Okay, so we're certainly getting there. Another thing that we can do and add to the entire image is start to just kind of like bring in the corners. It's called irising, and it's basically when the corners are sort of burnt out, they almost look black, and it focuses your eye really where you want it to go. So down at the bottom here, I'm going to click on the new layer. I'm going to go to my gradient tool, just as I did when I was using the masks. But this time, I'm literally going to be doing it straight onto the layer. So if I just show you here, pulling that in ever so slightly. Oh, got to make sure we've got black selected. There we go. Start bringing in those corners. There we go. That's nice. Good. And again, that works. Just doing it off the side almost. And it's funny how that little bit of irising, oh, too much, that little bit of irising really does draw your eye into the image a little bit more. Okay, so I'm getting I'm quite happy with how this is looking. What I encourage you to do now is just add those little details. And the thing for me that changes a piece of work from being a B grade to an A grade really is those fine little details, the attention to detail. So I expect to see this sort of thing at the top. I expect to see a slogan. I expect to see maybe some of the institutions at the bottom. Perhaps you've got an age rating down there. Some of the cast and crew. Those are the sort of things which I feel really do bring this up a notch. Looking back at this again now, I feel like I could do a little bit more with the snow texture. So I might add a few more of those. And I would just do the exact same process. But all in all, those are the key skills you need to make a movie poster in Adobe Photoshop. I'm going to go ahead and finish this and show you what it looks like as I'd have it finished, and we'll wrap up there. Okay, so here I am all finished with what I deem to be like my finished movie poster. Again, so I've just thrown this together in about an hour or so, but I've made a few changes just to get it to this stage. So what I ended up doing, and I just wanted to show you, was I wanted there to be more snow. I wanted there to really be this depth, and I feel like that's almost something that really finishes this. So I added another snow texture. It was a really, really full one this time. So rather than lower the opacity like I did the other one, I kept it at 100%, but I added a layer mask. And you can see these little black dots here. What I did was I got the gradient tool and I changed it to a circle. So what I could then do was draw fading black circles to get rid of, if I just show you here, to get rid of bits of snow where I wanted to try and make sure that like our faces were still clear. Because if I disable this mask quickly, you can see how it was. It was just too much. You couldn't see our faces. So if I enable it again, this little layer mask, that just made it so I could see it. I added, the 2 stars names at the top, and I kept that in like the house style of the stencil font. I added a little cheesy slogan, and I changed the font for this because you do find that, like, for the more formal parts of the movie poster, it will be in a different font. And again, this is something I just found online, but it gives you the idea of the institution information at the bottom. So that really is, in a nutshell, how easy it is just using a handful of tools to make a movie poster. Please do check the channel for more specific tool tips and some more advanced tutorials, but that should set you off on a good start. Thanks for watching.